It started like any other family gathering, but something fell off. I remember it was Lily's birthday, a sweet little celebration in our garden. She had just turned 5. We had balloons, a cake with those ridiculous, bright candles that she loved, and Oliver, our 7-year-old, was running around like he was on a sugar high. The sun was out, and everything should have been perfect. But it wasn't. Emma, my wife, looked distracted. You know that gut feeling you get when something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That was me the entire day. I had this gnawing sense of unease, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, but I didn't know if I was about to fall or if I'd imagined the danger altogether. She was talking to Dave, a colleague from her marketing job. Emma's always had a lot of male friends, and I'd never been the jealous type. But that day, at Lily's birthday party, I saw something that was hard to shake off. Dave wasn't just chatting with her. They were exchanging looks. You know, those fleeting glances that say more than words ever could. It was subtle, but I noticed it. I always notice these things. I try to tell myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just laughing at an inside joke from work. Maybe they were just good friends. But something about the way her body language shifted when he came close made my stomach churn. Throughout the day, I couldn't stop watching them. Emma was smiling, but it wasn't the smile she had for me. It was too intimate. It felt wrong. And the worst part? Dave was doing that thing where he leaned in just a bit too close. His eyes lingered too long on her lips when she spoke. I kept thinking, am I being paranoid? After everyone left and the kids were in bed, I sat down with a beer trying to brush it off. But my mind wouldn't let it go. I grabbed her phone, not even thinking twice about it. I never used to check her messages. I trusted her. Or I did, before I saw it. There was a text from Dave. Last night was fun. We should do it again soon, winky face. My heart stopped. You know that feeling like your chest tightens up? And for a second, you think you've misunderstood something? Yeah, that was me. I must have stared at that message for a full minute before I felt the rage start to boil up inside me. I walked straight to her. She was in the kitchen, pretending everything was fine, like she hadn't just shattered everything between us. Who the hell is Dave? I asked, holding up her phone. My voice came out harder than I expected. Emma looked at me, her face pale for just a second before she regained that stone-cold composure. What the hell, James? You're going through my phone now. She tried to play it off like I was the crazy one, gaslighting me like she always does when we argue. It's nothing. You're being paranoid. Dave and I are just friends. I can't believe you're doing this. At Lily's birthday, no less. I wasn't buying it. Not this time. Just friends don't send texts like this. What the hell does last night was fun mean, Emma? We were standing there, glaring at each other. The tension so thick you could have cut it with a knife. I couldn't believe she was turning it around on me like I was the one at fault for finding out. My mind was racing. Memories of every late-night work event she'd ever had, every unexplained dinner, every time she'd brush me off when I asked how her day was. You're imagining things, James. Stop being so insecure, she snapped. But her eyes gave her away. They always do. There was a flicker of something, guilt, maybe? Or fear. Either way, I wasn't imagining it. I knew I needed to talk to someone. The whole situation was eating me alive, and I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. That's when I called Sarah. Sarah and I go way back. We've known each other since we were kids, long before Emma even came into the picture. She knew me better than anyone, and for some reason, I felt like she'd understand. I didn't even tell her everything over the phone, just that I needed to talk. She was over at the house within the hour. It felt weird at first, spilling everything to her, but she listened like she always had. And when I told her about the text from Dave, she didn't flinch. Instead, she gave me this look like she knew something I didn't. James, she said, leaning forward, I've seen this kind of thing before. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Her words hit me hard. I wasn't crazy. Emma was hiding something, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking otherwise. Sarah offered to help me get to the bottom of it. She suggested we keep an eye on Emma, figure out what she was up to when she wasn't at home. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but at that point, what did I have to lose? The whole situation was spiraling out of control, and I needed answers. Sarah and I didn't waste any time. After that conversation, I felt like I was barely hanging on by a thread. I needed answers. I needed to see it for myself, to prove that the gnawing feeling inside me wasn't just paranoia, that I wasn't losing my mind. Sarah, always the practical one, suggested we follow Emma discreetly. We had to be smart about it, though. Emma wasn't stupid, and the last thing I needed was her catching us. She was already trying to paint me as paranoid. I didn't want to give her more ammo. So, there we were, two grown adults, parked across the street from Emma's office one night. Sarah sat beside me, watching the entrance like a hawk. It felt surreal, like we were in some low-budget spy movie. But this was my life now, following my wife around, trying to catch her in a lie. An hour went by, then another. I was about ready to call it a night when Emma finally appeared. She wasn't alone. Dave was with her, and as soon as I saw the two of them together, my heart sank. They were walking side by side, talking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It was as if I didn't exist. "Follow them," Sarah whispered, her voice low, as if we were about to bust them in some high-stakes crime. I didn't argue. We tailed them, keeping a good distance, not wanting to draw attention. They ended up at this small, upscale restaurant, one of those places with mood lighting, candles on every table, and wine glasses that were too big for their own good. Intimate. Too intimate. I watched them from the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Inside, Dave pulled out a chair for her, and Emma smiled. The same smile that used to be mine. The one she gave me when we first started dating, when I thought we were untouchable. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and watch them. I turned to Sarah, who was watching the whole thing unfold like she'd seen it 100 times before. "This is bullshit," I muttered, my voice low and trembling with barely contained rage. "How the hell did we get here?" Sarah didn't say much, but I could feel her sympathy. She'd been through something similar once, I knew that. She didn't need to spell it out for me. The betrayal, the lies, the slow destruction of everything you thought you had. It wasn't new to her. We sat there for what felt like an eternity. I watched them order food, drink wine, laugh like they were on some romantic date. I don't think I've ever felt anger like that before. Pure, unfiltered rage, the kind that sits in your chest and burns its way out. "I can't do this anymore," I said finally, breaking the silence. "I need to confront her." Sarah nodded, but there was a hesitance in her eyes. "You sure? You need to be prepared for whatever she might say." I wasn't sure. Hell, I didn't know anything anymore. But I couldn't keep going like this, living in the shadows of my own marriage, watching my wife live a double life. So we waited until they left, Emma and Dave walking out as if nothing in the world could touch them. It made me sick. By the time I got home, I was seething. I could barely think straight. Emma was already there, lounging on the couch like she hadn't just spent the evening out with another man. It was the casualness of it that pissed me off the most. Like this had become her normal, like I wasn't even a factor in her life anymore. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, not even bothering to hide the edge in my voice. Emma looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Out with friends." "What's with the interrogation?" I could feel the anger bubbling up again. But this time, I wasn't going to let her twist things around. "Cut the crap, Emma. I followed you. I saw you with Dave." Her expression changed instantly. There was again that flash of guilt. But instead of owning up to it, she doubled down, just like I knew she would. "You followed me? Jesus, James, do you even hear yourself? That's insane. You've lost it." I wasn't backing down this time. "I saw you with him, Emma, at that restaurant. You can't keep lying to me." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your heart race, because you know what's coming next is going to change everything. She stood up slowly, crossing her arms like she was trying to shield herself from what was coming. "Fine," she said finally, her voice cold, detached. Yes, I've been spending time with Dave. But it's not what you think. We're not, it's just, I've been lonely, James. You've been so wrapped up in your work, in the kids, in everything but me. It was just an emotional thing. It wasn't supposed to go this far. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emotional affair. She said it like that made it better, like it was less of a betrayal because they hadn't gone all the way. But to me, it didn't matter. Whether it was physical or not, she'd crossed the line, and there was no going back from that. Just a fling? You're trying to tell me this was just a fling? I spat, my voice rising. We never slept together, she shot back, as if that was supposed to absolve her. It was just, I don't know, I was confused. I'm sorry, but her apology was hollow. There was no real remorse in her voice. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. The fight went on for what felt like hours. Back and forth, accusations flying. I called her every name I could think of, and she threw her own barbs right back at me, accusing me of neglecting her, of not being the husband she needed. It was toxic, brutal. By the time it was over, I felt hollow inside. I crashed on the couch that night, unable to sleep, my mind racing. And in the middle of all that chaos, there was Sarah. She stayed with me, even though I didn't ask her to. We talked for hours, long after Emma had stormed off to bed. I don't know what to do, I admitted, staring up at the ceiling. It feels like my whole life is falling apart. Sarah nodded, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I've been there, James. It's not easy, but you'll get through this. We talked about the past, our old memories, the people we used to be before life got so damn complicated. Sarah opened up about her own failed relationship, how she'd been hurt before, how she understood the pain I was feeling. And as we talked, there was this tension between us, this unspoken thing that neither of us wanted to address. But it was there, and it wasn't going away. After the blowout with Emma, things got quiet between us. Too quiet. We were still living under the same roof, going through the motions for the kids, but it felt like a ticking time bomb. Every conversation was a minefield. Every glance filled with resentment. I knew Emma was still seeing Dave, and she knew I knew. But neither of us was ready to make the first move to end it. Not yet. That's when Sarah came up with the idea. We were sitting in a cafe, the kind where no one really knows you, and the coffee tastes like burnt toast. I was venting to her about the latest fight with Emma, another screaming match about trust, or lack thereof. You can't keep letting her walk all over you, James, Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. She's getting away with it, and she knows it. If you don't do something soon, this is going to eat you alive. I nodded, feeling every bit of what she was saying. But what the hell am I supposed to do? She's already checked out. I might as well be a ghost in my own house. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face, and for a second, I wasn't sure if she was serious or just messing with me. Make her jealous, she said, leaning in closer. Show her that you can move on, too. I stared at her. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? I'm not the one running around with a colleague. That's where I come in, Sarah said, her voice low and mischievous. We'll stage it. Something public. Somewhere she can't avoid seeing us together. It'll drive her mad. At first, I thought she was joking. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me. Emma had played me for a fool, and I was sick of feeling powerless. I wanted her to hurt like I was hurting. I wanted her to know what it felt like to lose something you thought you had in the palm of your hand. We spent the next hour hashing out the details. There was a charity gala coming up in a few weeks, something Emma had been talking about for months. It was one of those fancy events where everyone was expected to show up looking like they had their lives together. Emma and I were both supposed to attend, play the happy couple for the sake of appearances. That's where we do it, Sarah said, her eyes lighting up as the plan came together. We'll make sure she sees us together. We'll flirt, laugh, and let her watch. I bet she'll lose her mind. It was risky. I knew that. But at this point, what did I have to lose? The night of the gala arrived faster than I expected. Emma was in full prep mode, trying on dresses, making sure everything was perfect. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was curt, like she was checking a box. I played along, pretending I cared about the event as much as she did. But all I could think about was what was going to happen that night. Sarah and I had everything planned to the last detail. We arrived separately, but not too far apart. The venue was one of those massive ballrooms, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, couples in tuxedos and gowns sipping champagne. It was the kind of place where people came to see and be seen. I spotted Emma almost immediately. She was wearing a sleek black dress, her hair done up in that way she always did when she wanted to make an impression. And then I saw Dave. He was standing right next to her, looking every bit the smarmy bastard he was. Just seeing him there made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. Sarah appeared at my side, looking stunning in a deep red dress that clung to her in all the right places. She smiled at me, that knowing look in her eyes that said, "Let's do this." We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with people here and there, but always making sure we were close enough for Emma to notice. And she did. I could see her eyes flick over to us, narrowing slightly as Sarah and I laughed a little too loudly, our bodies a little too close. I made sure to keep my hand on Sarah's back, guiding her as we moved through the room, the way I used to with Emma. It didn't take long for Emma to catch on. I saw her glance at me from across the room, her smile faltering for just a moment before she turned back to her conversation with Dave. But it was too late. The seed had been planted. As the night went on, I made it more obvious. Sarah and I danced together, her body pressed against mine, and I could feel the tension in the air. Emma watched from the sidelines, her face tightening with every passing minute. It was working. By the end of the night, I could see the cracks forming in Emma's composure. She was pretending not to care, but I knew better. I could read her like a book, and when she finally couldn't take it anymore, she stormed out of the ballroom, leaving Dave standing there, looking confused. But it wasn't over yet. The real twist came after the gala, when Sarah and I found ourselves outside, in the parking lot, away from the prying eyes of the partygoers. We were both riding high from the adrenaline of the night, from the game we'd played so well. "I think that worked," I said, my voice low, a grin spreading across my face. Sarah laughed softly. "Oh," she was livid. "Did you see her face when we were dancing?" We stood there, the cool night air wrapping around us, and suddenly, the tension that had been building between us for weeks came to a head. Without thinking, I pulled Sarah closer, our lips crashing together in a heated kiss that felt like the culmination of everything we'd been through. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were in the back seat of my car, tangled together in a passionate frenzy. It was messy, raw, and exactly what I needed in that moment. A release from everything, the anger, the betrayal, the confusion. For that brief moment, nothing else mattered but the two of us. When it was over, we lay there, breathing heavily, the windows fogged up from the heat of the moment. I didn't know what to say. I felt exhilarated, like I'd taken back control of my life. But at the same time, there was a gnawing guilt in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Things had gotten complicated. I didn't plan for that to happen, I said finally, breaking the silence. Sarah turned to me, a small smile on her lips. "Neither did I. But I guess things never go according to plan, do they?" She was right. Nothing was going according to plan anymore. I didn't expect Emma to react so quickly, but I should have known better. The morning after the gala, I could feel the tension before she even said a word. Emma was in the kitchen, staring into her coffee like it held the answers to whatever was brewing in her head. I knew it was coming. She'd seen enough last night to make her crack. But this time, I was ready. "Do you have something to tell me, James?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. Too calm. I sipped my own coffee, pretending not to notice the storm gathering behind her eyes. "What do you mean?" She slammed her mug down on the counter, the sound sharp and jarring in the quiet house. "Don't play dumb with me. I saw you with her last night. You think I didn't notice you flirting with Sarah?" in front of everyone. I put my cup down slowly, my pulse quickening. I could see where this was going. And honestly, I was done with her games. So what if I was? What about you and Dave? You think I don't know what's been going on between you two? That hit the mark. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, she looked caught off guard. But Emma was always quick to recover. Don't turn this around on me, she spat. You've been acting like a complete bastard lately. Sneaking around, God knows where. And now, at the gala, you're all over Sarah like you don't give a damn who sees. I could feel the anger rising in me again, but this time, I didn't hold it back. I wasn't going to let her paint me as the villain in this. I followed you, Emma. I saw you with Dave at that restaurant, laughing, touching like I didn't even exist. You've been having an affair. Don't you dare act like the victim here. Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback, didn't try to twist my words. She just stood there, breathing hard, like I'd knocked the wind out of her. That's different, she said finally, her voice quiet but trembling with anger. Dave and I, it wasn't like that. Don't lie to me, I snapped, my voice rising. You've been sneaking around for weeks, and you think I'm the bad guy because I danced with Sarah? You've been cheating on me, Emma. Don't you get that? Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't sure if it was guilt or just her usual manipulation tactic. Emma knew how to play the part of the victim when it suited her. But this time I wasn't buying it. I made a mistake, she whispered. But I never. Stop. I interrupted, cutting her off. I don't care if you slept with him or not. You betrayed me. You've been lying to me, and I'm done. Emma looked like she was on the verge of breaking down, but I didn't feel sympathy anymore. I'd given her every chance to come clean, and instead, she tried to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. I wasn't going to let her twist things around this time. The damage was done. Things at home quickly went from bad to worse after that argument. It didn't take long for Oliver and Lily to notice that something was wrong. Kids are perceptive like that. No matter how much I tried to keep things normal, the tension between me and Emma was impossible to hide. One night, after another fight, this time quieter, but no less brutal, I walked into the hallway and saw Oliver standing there, staring at us with wide eyes. He didn't say anything, just looked between me and Emma like he was trying to figure out what was happening. Dad, he asked, his voice small and hesitant. Why are you and Mom always fighting? I froze, my heart breaking at the sight of him standing there, confused and scared. Lily appeared behind him, clutching her stuffed bunny, looking just as bewildered. I tried to smile, to reassure them, but it felt hollow. It's okay, Ollie. Sometimes grown-ups argue, but everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. It was far from fine, and I hated that they were getting caught in the middle of it. Emma was already gone, disappearing upstairs without a word, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. I knelt down, pulling both Oliver and Lily into a hug. I'm sorry, guys. I promise. I'm going to figure this out. But what the hell was I going to figure out? I couldn't stand being in the same room as Emma, let alone pretend like everything was okay. And the worst part was, I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. Sarah was the only thing keeping me grounded in the middle of all this chaos. Our affair hadn't stopped after that night in the car. In fact, it had only gotten more intense. We met up whenever we could, secretive dinners, stolen moments, always careful not to leave any trace. But as much as I tried to lose myself in the rush of it, the guilt was eating away at me. I was betraying my family. Every time I looked at Oliver or Lily, the weight of what I was doing crushed me a little more. They didn't deserve this. None of it. But every time I tried to break things off with Sarah, I couldn't. It was like I needed her, needed the escape she gave me from the hell my life had become. One night, as we lay tangled together in bed, the guilt finally spilled out. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I admitted, staring up at the ceiling. I feel like I'm losing everything. Sarah turned to face me, her expression soft but serious. You're not losing anything, James. You're gaining your freedom. Emma's been dragging you down for years, and you deserve to be happy. Her words were comforting, but they didn't erase the ache in my chest. But what about Oliver and Lily? I'm screwing everything up for them. You're not, Sarah said, her hand resting on my chest. You're doing what you need to do. Kids are resilient. They'll understand someday. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that what we were doing wasn't selfish, that it was just me taking control of my life. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I was playing with fire, and sooner or later, everything was going to burn. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. Dave was still a presence in my life, like a dark cloud hanging over everything. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the only way I'd ever get some closure was to confront him directly. I needed to see the man who destroyed my marriage face to face, to expose him for what he was. I wasn't sure if I was doing it for myself, for Emma, or for some misguided sense of justice. But I knew it had to happen. It didn't take much to track him down. Social media made it easy. I messaged him, asking to meet. He probably thought I wanted to discuss something work-related, maybe a project Emma had mentioned. But I had other plans. We met at a park, the kind with kids running around, parents pushing strollers, the smell of fresh-cut grass in the air. It was the last place anyone would expect a confrontation, which was exactly why I chose it. I wanted there to be witnesses. I wanted him to squirm under the public gaze. I saw him before he saw me. Dave stood by the fountain, looking around like he was waiting for an old friend. The arrogance oozing from him, even in casual clothes, made my skin crawl. I approached him, and when he saw me, his smile faltered. "James," he said, trying to sound casual, "didn't expect to see you here. What's this about?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. I got straight to the point. "You know damn well what this is about," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've been screwing my wife." His face froze, and for a moment, I saw the panic flicker behind his eyes. He tried to recover, plastering on that smug grin of his. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me," I snapped, taking a step closer. "I've seen the messages. I've seen the way you look at her. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you're innocent." By now, people were starting to notice. A few joggers slowed down, and parents nearby gave us curious glances, probably wondering what the hell was going on. But I didn't care. Let them see. Let them hear every word. "Look," Dave said, raising his hands defensively. "Nothing happened. Emma and we were just talking. She was unhappy, and we don't." I growled, cutting him off. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I know what happened. I'm here because I want you to look me in the eye and admit it. Admit what you did." His eyes darted around, like he was trying to find an escape, but there was none. "Not here. Not in front of everyone." "Fine," he muttered finally, his voice barely audible. "I screwed up. We had something, but it wasn't serious." My blood boiled at his words. He said it like it was nothing, like my entire marriage was just some casual fling he could dismiss. "Not serious?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You think you can walk away from this and act like it doesn't matter? You destroyed everything." By now, people had started to gather, watching the confrontation unfold. Dave's face was flushed, and for the first time, I saw the fear in him. He wasn't the confident asshole I'd imagined. He was just a coward who got caught. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it?" I shouted, my fists clenched at my sides. "Well, it did. And now, you're going to live with the consequences." Before I could say anything else, I saw her. Emma, standing at the edge of the park, watching us. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. She must have known something was going down, and she came to stop it. Too late. We didn't speak on the way home. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the things we weren't saying, but that were screaming in our heads. When we got inside, Emma collapsed on the sofa, her hands trembling. I stood there, looking at her, waiting for the inevitable breakdown. It didn't take long. She started sobbing, big, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I wanted to feel something, anger, satisfaction, anything, but all I felt was exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice barely coherent through the tears. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I just stood there, staring at her. "Then why?" I finally asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Why did you do it?" Emma buried her face in her hands, her words spilling out between sobs. "I don't know. I was lonely. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. You were always busy with work, the kids. I felt invisible. And then Dave came along, and he made me feel wanted. I know it's no excuse, but I was so lost." Her confession hit me harder than I expected. I had prepared for anger, for another fight, but this was different. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was broken, and despite everything, part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that I understood. But I couldn't. "You think I wasn't lonely?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You think I didn't feel the same way?" But I didn't go running to someone else. I stayed. I tried. "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I screwed up, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, James, don't leave. I can't do this without you." Her plea hit me like a punch to the gut. She was asking for something I wasn't sure I could give. Forgiveness? A second chance? After everything? But I couldn't give her what she wanted. Not anymore. The final confrontation happened later that night. The kids were in bed, and the house was eerily quiet. We stood in the living room, facing each other, and it felt like the weight of the entire world was pressing down on us. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm done, Emma. I'm done with all of it." She stared at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "You don't mean that?" "I do," I said more firmly this time. "We've been falling apart for years. Maybe this affair was just the final push, but we were broken long before Dave showed up. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and I can't pretend anymore." Emma sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, James. I'll do anything. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can—" "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's over. I'm not doing this for me, or for you. I'm doing it for the kids. They deserve better than this. Better than us." She was broken, completely shattered, but I couldn't help her. Not this time. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the door, I saw Sarah standing outside, watching from a distance. She didn't say a word, but her presence was enough. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. This chapter of my life was over. The house felt eerily quiet after Emma left. The finality of it hit me in waves. The first night alone was the hardest. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper memories of our life together, both good and bad. But those memories didn't carry the weight they once did. They felt distant, like echoes of a past I was slowly detaching from. I spent more time with Oliver and Lily, making a conscious effort to keep things normal for them, even though nothing felt normal anymore. We went to the park, had movie nights. I even tried cooking their favorite meals. And for the first time in a long time, I was present, really present. It wasn't easy. Every time I tucked them into bed, I felt the pull of guilt tugging at me for what they were going through. But I knew this was better than the toxic environment Emma and I had created. I tried not to think about Sarah too much, but that was impossible. After everything, she'd become a fixture in my life in a way I hadn't expected. What started as a plan for revenge had turned into something else, something neither of us had planned for. She'd been my rock through all of this, and I couldn't ignore the way things had escalated between us. But now that the dust was settling, I found myself questioning what came next. One afternoon, Sarah and I met up at a cafe, the same place where we'd come up with that insane plan to make Emma jealous. It felt strange being there again, this time with so much between us that hadn't been there before. We sat outside, sipping our coffees, the awkwardness hanging between us like a third person at the table. I've been thinking, I started, breaking the silence, about what comes next. Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine. Yeah, me too. The truth was things had gotten complicated. More complicated than I had ever anticipated. What started as an escape, a way to reclaim control over my life, had turned into something real. But now that the chaos was over, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. Do you regret it? Sarah asked suddenly, her voice soft but steady. I shook my head. No, I don't regret it. I needed you, Sarah, and I don't think I could have gotten through all this without you. Her expression softened, but there was a tension in her eyes. But, I sighed. I don't know if I'm ready for more. Not yet. The words felt heavy as they left my mouth, but they were true. I wasn't ready. My life was a mess, and the last thing I wanted was to drag Sarah deeper into it. I cared about her, maybe more than I was willing to admit, but that didn't mean I was ready to start something new. I understand, she said, her voice calm but laced with sadness. I didn't expect you to have all the answers right now. But I need to know, is this just about you not being ready? Or is it something more? I didn't have a good answer for her. Maybe it was a little bit of both. Maybe it was the guilt I felt about moving on too quickly, or maybe it was because I wasn't sure if what we had was real or just something born out of the chaos. I don't know, I admitted. I need to focus on the kids right now, on rebuilding my life. I don't want to hurt you, Sarah. She nodded, looking down at her cup. I get it. I really do. But I also don't want to be someone's second choice. I don't want to be the woman you turn to just because you need comfort. The truth in her words stung. She was right. As much as I wanted to deny it, there was a part of me that had been using her to fill the void left by Emma. But Sarah deserved better than that. She deserved more than just being part of my revenge, more than being a crutch while I figured my life out. I care about you, Sarah, I said quietly. I really do. But I think we both know this wasn't built to last. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes. But there was also acceptance. Yeah, she said softly. I think you're right. In the days that followed, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I realized that the person I needed to focus on the most right now wasn't Sarah or even Emma. It was me. I needed to rebuild myself, figure out who I was outside of all the mess that my marriage had become, and I needed to be the father that Oliver and Lily deserved, even if that meant putting everything else on hold. I kept in touch with Sarah, but things between us changed. We both knew it couldn't be the same, not after everything that had happened. We didn't end things in a dramatic way. It wasn't like that. It was a quiet, mutual understanding that what we'd had was born out of circumstance, not something that could sustain a real relationship. There was a peace in that realization. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't tied down by the weight of my failing marriage or the guilt of the affair. I was free to focus on what mattered, healing and being there for my kids. One evening, as I sat with Oliver and Lily, watching a movie they'd picked out, I realized that this was what mattered. This was where I needed to be. It wasn't about revenge or proving something to Emma anymore. It wasn't even about finding someone new. It was about finding myself, being the kind of father they could rely on, and learning to live with the scars without letting them define me. I didn't know what the future held, but for now, that was enough.